Irish politics moves fast, and we're here to keep you in the loop. Daily updates, raw speeches, and real debates straight from the source. If you want to stay ahead, hit subscribe and join the conversation.
Be questioned also as to why somebody in the know in the property sector is doing that. And I think also just the whole ridiculousness of this housing czar is being exposed. We don't need a housing czar to tell us that there's land there, public land that could be developed. I'll be highlighting some land banks in Jack Chambers' own constituency. I believe he's taken leaders' questions today, that you don't need a housing czar to allocate money for. And also the housing minister, who's become practically invisible. There's search parties at this stage looking for him. I don't think anybody knows who he is. I think we have to obviously raise about what's happened in Palestine and the intention of the Israeli state now for a full-scale invasion and annexation of Gaza, the enforced famine, now conditions that are developing. And while it was good to hear the Taoiseach yesterday say to call this out, words are not enough. We actually need action. And history will harshly judge the Taoiseach and indeed the Taoiseach who've been saying we're doing all we can. They're not doing all they can. There are so many things that they could do, like the Occupied Territories Bill, the stopping of Shannon being used as a refuelling. They're well aware that arms are being shipped through there, or flown through there. And also the central bank, I think the highlighting that Ireland is processing Israeli bonds on behalf of the EU. These are effectively war bonds. You know, this should be stopped immediately. I also, a couple of other issues I want to mention, which is the announcement yesterday by the Minister for Justice that he will bring in some amendment regarding the counselling notes, which myself and survivors have been highlighting. I've talked to survivors since the Minister's announcement, and what he's proposing just is not good enough. It's not going to remove the fact that you have this threat hanging over you that your counselling notes can be accessed. And that is primarily what people want to stop. They're taking it out of the survivor's hands, passing it to a judge to decide. Maybe it will lessen it, but it still does not remove the fact that your counselling is not confidential and can be accessed by your abuser. And he needs to just cut out the faffing around now and just listen to what people are saying. And I also, in that context, want to mention our Manosphere March on Thursday. This poster that we had, that Rosa had been putting up in Dublin City Council, has been banned by the council. They would not let us erect these posters. When asked why, they said it could be offensive because it depicts individuals. Posters often depict individuals, usually very powerful individuals, which is the case here. And when they were specifically asked, they mentioned Trump, which could be offensive to American tourists. So I find the Manosphere very offensive for women, for children, and indeed for tourists, because it can create dangers for them as well. And I find this decision totally unacceptable, and it's another incursion on the right to organise effective protests in the capital. So we're appealing to people to share it online, to attend the march, and we will be highlighting it in other ways.
Thanks. A couple of things quickly. The first thing is in relation to Brendan McDonagh. The revelations from the ditch that he used false names in legal documents with the land registry, and he was advertising a property for €10,000 a month without having planning permission for a short-term let. They do not only disqualify him from being this supposed housing czar. In my opinion, they raise a very serious question mark over his ability to continue as the head of NAMA, and I think there's now very serious questions for the government, who claim they were not aware of these things, as to whether they stand over his continuation as head of NAMA. The second point is, people would have seen Simon Harris on the Late Late Show And like Ruth has said, in the last 24 hours, we've had a lot of, welcome words of criticism from Simon Harris and Micheál Martin of Israel and the, turning up, if it's possible, of the genocide, the deliberate creation of starvation in Gaza. But it really, his performance on the Late Late Show, what he said was quite incredible in terms of the overflights. He claimed, I get you the quote, he said that he's not aware, he does not believe weapons have been flown through Irish airspace to Israel. That is a deliberate, constructed ignorance. He knows all about the weapons being flown through Irish airspace to Israel. He's been told about it, not just after they've gone through, but in advance. The Ditch have emailed him and others at the top of government repeatedly to say, here's a flight coming through with weapons going to Israel, and it is continuing to happen. Challenge Airlines, which was the first airline that was exposed, continues now to do that. We heard about 9 months ago that there was going to be an investigation in the Department of Taoiseach to find out what was going on. We've since heard nothing since about this investigation, and now Simon Harris is basically claiming not to know anything about this at all. It's absolutely bizarre. I went back to the Through the Dáil transcript to September of last year, where I raised it with Simon Harris. Then at that point I put it to him, so it was not the first time he heard about it, and he then gave the answer about you need to have an application to carry through weapons of war. There are no such applications. As the Minister for Transport has said, no exemption were requested. He is engaging with the company, and I will ask him to update the House when he has information. So they can't dodge this. They can't just have this studied pretend ignorance that they don't know anything about it. It's all very well to have harsh words of criticism for Israel, but you actually have to do something, and one thing is to enforce the law. It is illegal to transport weapons through Irish airspace without having been granted permission, and these have not been granted permission. And it's really quite infuriating to hear them have words of criticism of Israel, but then not do anything to delay and delay and delay in terms of the Occupied Territories Bill, and to do nothing in terms of the overflights. The final point is just to raise a real concern. It's very concerning to hear what is being proposed in terms of the banning of face coverings on protests. This seems to be a very serious incursion into the right of people to protest, and those that will be most affected are disabled people who were to the fore in opposing the last government's agenda, who by protesting forced back the government's agenda in terms of the Green Paper on disability reform. Many disabled people can only protest in circumstances where they can wear face coverings because they are vulnerable, compromised individuals. And now the government is moving towards criminalising, which seems to be a part of the kind of European-wide trend of cracking down on the right of people to protest.
Well, you accuse Brendan McDonagh of using false names. How do you know that he is not Cloric Brendan McDonagh, or how do you know that he's not a Gaelbor who, in fairness, it would be common for people who are fluent in Irish to use both an English and Irish version of his name. Do you have any proof that that's not the case?
Well,
It's a serious accusation to me.
I know that the translation of Brendan is not Padraig.
But how do you know that that's not his first name? Brendan might be his middle name, but if another document it's E.B. McDonagh.
But he's using multiple different names. So he uses one name as his public name, as head of NAMA putative housing czar, which is Brendan McDonagh. That's how he's been known in the public eye for a long period of time. He is then consciously choosing to use two different aliases, PB McDonagh and Padraig McDonagh, in land registry. How do I know that his
official name on his passport or his driver's license or his official government name is important?
Well, you don't usually use three different names for
I
the
worked
one
in a bank,
housing
I can tell you that
transaction.
A lot of people do actually.
Really?
Different
Okay.
variations of their names, yeah.
I think it's
How many variations of people's names will they use?
Really?
I-
Okay.
well, I think they're good questions to ask him. I think
Well, you're the one making the accusation.
well, But we know for a fact, it is not an accusation, we know for a fact that he has used two names other than the name that he normally goes by. Well, they certainly appear to be false names. And so if he's able to show and produce a passport to say, actually his name is PB McDonough, or actually his name is Padraig McDonough, obviously there would now be a question about the other one of those. One of those might turn out to be his real name, and then somehow it's being owned by Brandon McDonough all this time, and it's not actually his name, and either the PB McDonough or the Padraig McDonough will then be in question. But I think there are now very serious questions for him. I mean, it's not something, I don't know if people who are like in the property business know that like this is what you do, you use aliases. Obviously it's a thing that the Ditch has uncovered repeatedly in terms of politicians. It was Niall Collins who had multiple variations on his names of the various property that he owned. It seems to be a thing that people do, which again, I'm very innocent on these matters. I'm not connected to property developers, but it certainly seems that a deliberate use of a different name than the name he's known by in order to avoid the connection being made.
Well, as I understand it, Brendan McDonough hasn't done anything illegal, so why are you calling his position in NAMA into question?
Because as head of NAMA, one of his jobs is to kind of uncover this kind of complex ownership or different names or whatever in terms of finding who is actually owns properties, why they own them, and so on, right? And he's meant to be representing the interests of the public. That's meant to be a public that obviously needs to see a resolution of the housing crisis. And in two respects now, it seems that in his personal affairs, he's going in the opposite direction. So it doesn't seem that he has, it certainly is reported that he did not have planning permission to have short-term letting. In an RPZ, you need planning permission in order to have to put it up on Airbnb or VRBO. I think it was probably up on both. So I think that is a contributing factor to the housing crisis. People behaving in that way. I think that's a big problem, and I think people hiding their property portfolios, whatever, their dealings with the land registry by using different names is also a significant problem. So the idea that this guy should still be the head of NAMA is, I think, very questionable.
Paul, just one quick question, just obviously in the story itself. Story that happened last half hour on RTV's Director General Kevin Agnew saying that he's requested a conversation with the European Broadcasting Group about the
Eurovision.
Israeli participation. Just your response to what you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's obviously it's very good that the NUJ in RTE, the journalists, have come out clearly saying that Israel should not be participating in Eurovision. That's really welcome. That seems to be now applying some pressure to the head of RTE. We think, it is obscene to think that Israel would participate in Eurovision, given the deepening genocide. That the very, very least a state broadcaster like RTE can do is to say Israel should not be participating in Eurovision.
Should you take a further stand if Israel does, they're allowed to participate, like Ireland pull out or RT not broadcast?
Don't do it. I mean, yeah, I think... Okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't think we should be participating in the Eurovision alongside Israel. That was our position last year when Israel was allowed to participate. That'll be our position again this year. Hopefully the pressure will tell and Israel will not participate.
This morning, the Justice Minister Jim O'Callaghan was saying that he reaffirmed the government's previous position of wanting to speed up deportations of failed asylum seekers who have not met the threshold after an examination. Do you have any reaction to that remark by the Minister?
Not for Gript, no. Not for Gript, I don't, no. I don't have an answer.
That's not really fair.
Why is that?
He's a member of the press. He's asking a question.
I'm just saying I don't answer questions for
Press
Gript.
freedom in this country, and he's a member of the press. You're a member of the press council. They're asking you a question.
Really?
That's not very fair.
Really, yeah. A lot of things aren't very fair, and I don't think he needs you to stick up for him.
Well, I would hope that if the roles were reversed, someone would stick up for me. I don't
Would
think
you?
I don't think that's fair.
Okay.
You had a question, Jack?
I'm not going to pin him down. I mean, if you guys
Yeah.
aren't ready to take that.
Thank you for watching. If you want to stay connected with the most important voices in Irish politics, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Here you get unfiltered access to political debates, speeches, and interviews, straight from the source, every single day. Be informed, be engaged, right here with us.